Hello, good afternoon, good evening, and assalamu alaikum to everyone. This is your tutor for the ATX Practice to Pass webinar for the September 2021 session. I welcome you all on behalf of ACCA. Guys, if everybody can use the raise their hand feature in the software that they're using and let me know that they can clearly hear me. Thank you. Thank you. Good. So, guys, let's start with some important tips and my introduction first. My name is Mia Saad Mohammed and I am your tutor today. So let me start with a funny quotation of Albert Einstein, although I am still to figure out that whether he said it or not, that the hardest thing in the world is to understand income taxes. However, in ATX, we have a lot to study apart from income taxes as well. My name is Mia Saad Mohammed and I teach at one of the Gold Approved Learning Partner LGS International Degree Program at Lahore, Pakistan. I've been teaching since more than 4 to 5 years, and my specialized areas are advanced audit and advanced taxation. And one of my student has also achieved distinction in the advanced taxation UK exam variant. And let me tell you an interesting fact. I conducted these webinars back in 2019 as well for the taxation and as well as advanced taxation exam. And there was a student of mine who attended the webinar from Saudi Arabia, and the webinars helped her a lot that she was able to score a distinction in the taxation exam. And since then, I started to believe that these webinars do make a difference in the students' preparation. So I'll try my level best to help you as much as possible, and we'll all try to make these webinars as much useful as we can. So I'll now move on to the paper pattern, guys. As you guys are well aware of that, our paper contains two sections, the section A, section B. All of the questions in all type of sections in paper is compulsory. So in section A, we'll have two compulsory question. One will be of 35 mark and one will be of 25 mark. And whenever I have to solve a bigger problem, what I always do is I divide it into smaller problems, and it makes it easier for you to solve it. I'll suggest you the same for your exam as well, that you should break your exam into several parts and then try to understand as to how well you can, solve it or attempt it. So in first question, your examiner has clearly specified that there will be 4 professional marks, and out of these 4 professional marks, 2 marks will be for the format of either the letter, memorandum, or briefing notes, and 2 marks will be on the layout of how well you have laid the question or how well your structure of the answer was. Now, the examiner has also specified that in section A, there'll be 5 marks dedicated to ethics. So we are sure and we are absolutely sure that these 5 marks will get tested in question number either 1 or 2. It is not necessary that they will get tested in question number 1. They often get tested in question number 2. However, it will either be in question number 1 or question number 2. So what I'll suggest to you is that you should focus on these 9 marks. Why? Because they do make a lot of difference. There is a chance that when you start attempting the paper, obviously every student has their topics which are their strength, and every student has some topics which they are not in, that much confident in solving. So you should try to gain easy marks from wherever you can. So these are the 9 marks that you're short about, that these will get tested in exam. And if you just study and practice the ethics part, you'll be easily able to score the 5 marks. However, in the remaining part of the area, you're not sure from where the examiner will gonna select the question. So in section B, there'll be two 20-mark question, and the difference between the questions in section A and section B is the size of the question. The section B questions are normally, because of their marks and shorter requirements, are less comprehensive as compared to the section A question, and their answer is normally is not required as detailed as it is required in section A. I'll keep sharing the tips with you when I'll be solving the questions with you. So normally what we have seen is that the examiner tries to select the question number one either from individual taxes, and when I talk about individual taxes, I mean income tax, capital gains tax, value added tax, and inheritance tax. These are the four type of taxes that are applicable in an individual in UK. However, the fifth type of tax that is in our syllabus is corporation tax, that is only applicable on companies. And the only type of tax that is applicable on both individuals and companies is value added tax. Apart from that, the company does not pay income tax because they pay corporation tax on their income. The companies do not pay capital gains tax because they pay corporation tax on their capital gains as well. And the companies is not a living thing, so the inheritance tax does not apply on companies. So on companies, only corporation tax and VAT applies. However, on individual, the other four type of taxes applies. Now, the examiner either normally select individual taxes for question number one because he has a wider chunk of syllabus to examine in those in that question, or he selects corporation tax plus VAT for question number one. But normally what I have seen, he's more inclined towards individual taxes when it comes to section number one. And if that is the case, then section number two is normally on the corporation tax plus VAT. And then when it comes to section B, question number 3 and 4, we do not have any preferences. He can test from wherever he can. He sometimes tests corporation tax again in section B. Sometimes he just only focuses on uh, individual taxes. So we are not sure about it. Now, uh, as like all other optional papers, the pass rates are quite low for this paper. However, if you compare it with other optional papers, that is the advanced audit, the advanced performance management, and financial management, passing rates are reasonably better. So that is why I believe when it comes to optional papers, it is one of the easiest paper to pass. So I do not know what your preferences were when you were choosing the advanced tax exam, but I can assure you that if you have chosen for whatever reason, it is one of the easiest exam when it comes to the optional exams. Now, what are the key reasons of failure? Poor exam technique, like it applies on all paper across ACCA, that if you have a poor exam technique, you are unable to pass the exam. Poor understanding of the requirement, this is a lot, one of the biggest problem when it comes to ATX. The problem is that the student is in the transition phase from the taxation exam to the advanced taxation exam, and is unable to understand that what is the level of understanding or the application of knowledge that the examiner expects from a student of an ATX exam, because he has previously passed the tax exam, which is more of a computational type of exam, numerical exam, if I would like to elaborate. But the ATX exam is entirely different when it comes to paper. The syllabus is 80 to 85% same. So that is why the student gets confused. They think that this the tax was pretty straightforward exam, so advanced tax will be the same. That is not the case, let me tell you clearly. uh, when it comes to advanced taxation exam, the examiner think that you have a skill which, if a professional is working in an accountancy firm, he must have to communicate with the client and provide him the solution to the matter of his taxation problems. So do remember, when you are appearing as a student of a taxation exam, not the advanced taxation, you are only required to know the computational side of the tax, that you should know as to how to calculate tax. When it comes to ATX, you should know the tax in depth so that you can suggest or you can perform tax planning for your clients. That is the level. So if when you guys will go into the your professional life, yeah, you will see that a person gradually grows in their career. For example, when you'll start, you'll be a trainee and you will be expected to do basic stuff. But with the passage of time, you guys will learn, and then more advanced type of tasks will be allocated to you. So you should consider yourself that in a taxation exam, you were only required to know the computational bit, but here you need to perform the tax planning. And to perform the tax planning, you should understand the topic yourself first, so then you can advise the client as to how it works. And do remember, the client is coming, or the person who in the exam is asking for you to answer following questions is a layman. He does not have any idea as to how tax work, so you have to make him understand as to how tax works. So what happens is, one of the common reason of failure in the exam is, which is my next point as well, that the answers lack detailed. Problem is that you guys perform calculations in the advanced taxation exam and the examiner does not give you any number. Consider yourself a layman. For example, you guys are studying advanced taxation exam of UK variant. Let's talk about Pakistan variant. You guys do not have any idea as to how taxation of Pakistan works. So let's say you have a question regarding a tax of Pakistan tax, and you ask me, sir, as to how we should do this. And I, put a calculation on the piece of paper and provide you that piece of paper. Will you be able to understand by just looking at those calculations? No, obviously not. You want me to explain you as to what I have done on that piece of paper, and that is the difference between the taxation and the advanced taxation exam, that you not only have to perform the calculations, but you have to also elaborate that what you have done above, what is those calculations, you have to make them understand to a layman. So that is the difference between the advanced taxation exam, that you have to perform calculations in the advanced taxation, but you have to elaborate. And there will be questions where there will be no calculations at all. You just have to explain to the client as to what he's asking. For example, he's asking you, is there any relief in capital gains tax available, and what are the conditions of that relief? So you do not have to do or perform calculations here. You just have to explain him that what is the relief, what is the eligibility criteria of the relief, are there any deadlines, and how it should be applied. That is what you have to make him understand. So now there'll be no calculations here in such type of questions. And then there'll be questions where there'll be calculations as well as elaboration is required as well. The examining team is quite frustrated with this behavior of students, and they have now started by explicitly explaining in the requirement that explain with the support of calculations. I mean, you have to explain, but you have to perform the calculations to support your explanation. Why? Because there were two type of students. The majority was only performing calculations in the exam and eventually getting failed. And then there were students who were only elaborating. Now the client is not only concerned in understanding as to how you will be saving his tax, but also he'll be needing numbers as well. For example, if I am visiting a person and I'm a layman, I want to ask him that, look, I am getting this new job, so can you let me know that what is the amount of money that I'll be getting into my pocket after paying all sort of taxes. So he'll gonna do the calculations and let me know that this is the figure. Then what I'm gonna ask him, that is there any way that you can reduce my tax? If he'll answer me yes, I can reduce it by 10%, obviously I'm gonna ask how. It is not that I'll say okay, thank you, just save the 10% for me please. That's not how the things work. So you have to explain the client with the support of calculation. Look, these are the calculations, and let me tell you what are these calculations. This is this rule, this is this rule, and this is the following type of xx relief, and by claiming that I'll be able to save you this amount of taxes. So this is the amount of knowledge or the skill you need to express in the exam. I do not know that how many of you are repeating the exam. So can you, only those students raise their hand who are repeating the exam in September 21? Okay, thank you. They're not that much, but let me tell you, uh, to those specifically who are repairing in the exam, that you guys obviously can relate to what I'm trying to say. Okay, then poor time management, that is especially the issue in optional papers, because they are so time demanding that the students are unable to make their time management. And now in the last attempt, that was the first attempt of computer based exam, this was a very significant issue which the students faced. Why is that? Because the students were working or the practicing traditional way on piece of paper, and they were not practicing on the practice platforms that has been provided by ACCA or the spreadsheet softwares. And when they had to do that for the very first time in the exam, they were unable to do the calculations or solve the paper on computer. Why? Because they didn't had practiced enough for that. And there were many students that said, sir, I mean, we knew that answer to all the questions, but we were unable to solve. Why? Because the computer issue was there. And when I asked everybody out of those students, how many hours have you spent practicing the questions on computer? And they were like, uh, so few students said, sir, we have practiced couple of questions, and few were like 4 to 5 questions. After performing 4 to 5 questions or practicing 4 to 5 questions, I can guarantee you that you cannot develop your skill on practicing or solving the question on the spreadsheet or the computer. So you have to learn this thing, that not only this time or from now onwards, not only have to equip yourself with the knowledge that is required to pass the exam, but also you must have sufficient skill to solve the paper onto the computer. And then when you solve onto the computer, the time management will entirely be different as compared to when you were solving on the paper. Because when you were solving on the paper, you didn't had any issue in transforming your knowledge onto the piece of paper, because you were writing since you have started studying. But when it comes to writing on the computer, that many of you may be doing it for the first time. Some of you have done it in the fundamentals, but you know that in fundamentals, in section C, only section C we have to solve on the computer. And for that, 70% or 60% of the exam is normally the objective type, so we do not get to practice that much on the computer. So this time in professional papers, you have to solve the complete paper onto the computer, not just the 40% subjective paper. So you have to develop your skills. Now, so time management is an issue. Then I normally suggest students that when they pass their taxation exam, they should try to appear in advanced taxation exam as soon as they can, because 80% or 85% of the knowledge that is required in advanced taxation is from the taxation exam. So if you have studied it, you have that knowledge fresh in your mind, you should try to appear in the advanced taxation exam as soon as possible. But if you have passed the paper long time ago and the knowledge is not that refresh in your mind, you have to pay extra attention to areas that you studied, or the knowledge that you have studied in the taxation exam, because the examiner has clearly specified that 100% knowledge that is the part of taxation course is the prerequisite of the advanced taxation exam. So that you guys have to be careful in that. Moving on, let me discuss the strategy that we'll be applying in this session. It's a 5-day session, 3 hours daily, and in 3 hours, I will solely be practicing, focusing on exam practicing. And as you guys know, that one of the key reasons, or one of the differences you can say from taxation exam of advanced taxation, is that in a taxation exam, if you're solving an MCQ, that MCQ will surely be either on income tax or corporation or VAT or any one specific type of tax. When it comes to section C as well, the examiner has specified that one question will be on corporation and one will be on income tax. So in section C, you're also quite sure that you just need to solve or must have one type of tax knowledge in solving that question. But when it comes to advanced taxation, all questions are on different type of taxation. There will be no question in ATX exam that will be focusing on one type of tax. Either there will be two type of taxes that are tested in question or more. And I have seen questions quite regularly on individual taxes, especially the question number one, in which the examiner tries to test all four questions, all four chapters. Income tax, there is an individual who has some sort of a problem in income tax. Then he has sold something, so he needs suggestions on capital gains tax, and he's also planning to make some transfers, so he needs suggestion on inheritance tax. And then he also has a query on value added tax. So I have seen questions that are tested on four type of taxes, and these are quite common nowadays. And there are many questions you can see that are at least on three type of taxes. So do remember that one of the key differences of taxation exam from advanced taxation is that in advanced taxation there'll be multiple type of taxes that will be tested in the exam. So then do remember that if you guys have passed your taxation exam before March 2020, you guys have studied Finance Act 19. Now, after the March attempt, the like every year, ACCA updates the syllabus according to the last Finance Act, that is Finance Act 20 right now. So you might have studied the Finance Act 19, and now you are studying Finance Act 20 for the advanced taxation exam. So you need to study the key changes or the key you can say new rules that have been introduced in the new Finance Act. And in the first two attempts, it is always an easy guess to identify that the examiner will try to test these new rules just to check that whether the students have the idea of these new Finance Act changes or not. So I'll be highlighting those Finance Act changes with you. In this session, my own course notes have been uploaded in the handout section. You guys can download that. I will suggest everybody to download that before we start. Then we'll be using the question bank from past papers. So in the handout section, you will see there's a question day-wise plan. So day-wise plan with the question names. In that, I have not only mentioned the name of the questions, but I have also mentioned the attempt of that. Because the rules gets changed every year or the rates gets revised every year for the taxation exam, we cannot use past papers directly because they will be outdated. So that is why I always suggest my students to use exam practice exam kits, and it is my recommendation. You can follow any of the approved learning partners material, but I would suggest that you guys should use the Kaplan revision kit. So I have not only mentioned the name of the questions, but I have also mentioned the attempt. If you do not use Kaplan revision kit, you can use any other revision kit, and the questions you can easily find with the help of the attempt I have mentioned. Now, uh, to solve the question, because our exam is now computer based, so I will not be performing the solution of the questions onto the screen with the help of stylus. Rather, I'll be solving the questions on the spreadsheet to make you realize or to make you let me tell you the techniques of the computer, so or the CB platform, so which will make it easier for you to solve the question. Now, before we start our today's session officially with the help of questions, I would like everybody to ask if they have any questions in the chat section. Okay, so we have few questions. Okay, guys, I will provide those who are not on Facebook. I will provide you with my email address at the end of the session. Azhar Abbas, I was just giving the example of Pakistan variant. Uh, Agnes, you have said that there are few areas in my notes that have been highlighted yellow. It means that these are the changes that have been made in the Finance Act. Just to make you guys realize that these are the changes I have normally highlighted yellow, the changes that the Finance Act has introduced. Agnes, I'll be introducing you to the ACCA practice platform, and there you can find the questions that ACCA have upgraded to the latest Finance Act. Azhar, your question is that you have passed a different variant of F6 or the taxation exam, and now for the ATX you have to opt for the UK variant because that variant is not available. So yes, you can do it. There are certain students to whom ACCA provide exemption for the fundamental papers, and they may not have studied the taxation exam as the part of their previous degree. So they have to study the, if they opt for tax, from the scratch as well. So it is doable in my opinion. I have sent my email address to all of you in the question section. So if there are any other questions, I can dedicate 2 more minutes to the question and then we have to move on. Uh, Paita, you have rightly highlighted an issue with the advanced taxation exam, that when you have to solve a question and it deals with multiple type of taxes, you first have to go back and revise yourself that what were these topics were. But when you move on to another question and then after a certain period of time you come to that question, you tend to forget. This is the problem with tax, that you tend to forget it. So the solution to that is that you must have to revise, revise and revise. But there will be certain topics that you may forget each and every time. It is not the case with all the topics. Alias Salan, there is no definite number that I can say that you can attempt these 10 questions and they will cover every area of the syllabus. The syllabus is so wide that there are no questions that cover every area of the syllabus. However, the questions that I have choose, they cover most of the syllabus. I cannot assure you that they will gonna cover every part of the syllabus. So you have to attempt as many questions as you can in order to cover all area of the syllabus. And do remember, guys, there is a misconception that I tend to highlight. In order to pass the exam, you need to attempt 100% of the paper. But 100% of the exam needs not to be correct. Only out of the paper that you have attempted, if more than 50% is correct, you will pass the exam. So it doesn't matter that you have attempted, let's say there's few students there like, sir, we have attempted 90 marks of worth of paper. Will we manage to pass? What matters is the quality of the paper that you have attempted. What percentage of the paper will be is of the criteria, is of the level that can achieve a pass grade. That is what matters. Okay guys, so let's start the question, and when after every question I'll dedicate 5 minutes so that I will answer your questions related to either that question or if there is any other question. But in between the question, I will not be able to answer your questions. There is a chance that if there are several parts of the question, after finishing one part, I'll may be able to answer the question. Okay, guys. So let's move on to the question. I'll be switching off my camera because it sometimes delays the view of the screen that I'll be sharing with you to solve the exams. On ACCA website, if you write on Google ATX exam, and then on the ATX exam, if you go, this will be the landing page of the ATX exam. You have to scroll down onto learning and revision. Here you will find CBE question practice ACCA practice platform. If you click on that, at the bottom of the page, under the resources heading, it will say log into the practice platform. If you click on that, it will take you to a new page where you have to enter your ACCA ID and password. When you sign into that, it will this page in front of you. From the names of the paper on the right side of the screen, you have to choose advanced taxation. Click on this plus sign, then choose your variant. For example, ours is UK. Then click on the ACCA official resources, and then here you can find the past exam library. There are two exams, ATX December 2020 exam and then ATX June 2021. Now this we cannot use because it has been updated till Finance Act 19, but we can use this exam. Okay, then if by clicking on the practice exam, you can find three more exam papers: practice exam 1, practice exam 2, practice exam 3. Here you will see this sort of an option called assign. I have already assigned to myself, so that is why it is saying me unassign. Just click on this assign, and then it will come onto this screen. You have to click on this, and here you can clearly see that I have assigned following papers to myself. All three practice exams, because they have been upgraded to Finance Act 2020. Here you can clearly see, and then ATX June exam, it can tell you that it has been updated to 21-22 syllabus, which means Finance Act 2020. So these are the four exams that we can use from the practice to pass platform. However, there are certain questions that I'll be solving with you that are not available on practice to pass platform, that I'll be solving with you on a plain spreadsheet. That is Microsoft Excel, which we normally uses. Now, I have already opened these exams for my ease, and this is how an exam looks like. Today, the first question that I'll be solving with you out of the day-wise question plan. The reason it says June 2021 exams, because I have also conducted this webinar last time for the June 2021 exam. It is the same list. However, I am planning to add few more questions in that from tomorrow onwards. So this list may get dated from tomorrow, but for today, this list will be the same, and we'll be solving these four questions. Out of that, the first question, that is Akil and Damia, it is from September 18 attempt, and ACC has included this question into the practice test 1 that has been also upgraded to Finance Act 2020. You can also find this question in your any practice to pass kit. For example, I have suggested the Kaplan kit. You can also find this in the Kaplan kit as well. Now there are students who sometimes ask me, sir, as to how we can look for the answers of these questions. So let me tell you as to how you can look for the answers. All you have to do is, by clicking the next, move on to the last screen of this question. Let's say this is the last question of the paper. I'll click on this next, and then I'll say I have reviewed all. So here you can see that these are the questions, section A question, section B question. You can simply navigate as well. And this will tell you what are the questions that you have attempted and what are the questions that you have not attempted. Then you can just click end exam and say yes. What it will gonna do is that it will change this exam from home to mark. There you can see that practice test 1 is there for mark. If I click on self mark, it will open this new page in front of me. This is a taxation exam. Sorry, I have to open the advanced taxation one. So these are the advanced taxation one. Let's say we mark this exam. There you can clearly see that when you comes to your self mark option, you can clearly see the answers to the question. This is question number 1, and I can see the answer to question number 1. If I move on to question number 2, it will show me the answer to question number 2. So you can take the answers from there if you do not have the Kaplan kit, and if you have the Kaplan kit, you can take the answers from the Kaplan kit. It will also have the marking scheme so as the Kaplan kit, but there are some additional resources in Kaplan kit like taking tutors top tips, walking in the footsteps of the examiner, examiner notes, examiner reports, examiner comments. These are the additional sort of resources that you'll find onto the answer of Kaplan kit. That is why I suggest to use that. So before I move on, any questions? Quickly, I have 2 minutes. I can answer your questions. Yes, Shabina Nazir, to answer your question, if you click there, help tax tables, then you click on this tax tables. There you can clearly see the tax tables. And by clicking the print sign, you can save it. There will be option called save as PDF, and if you'll save, you can easily save those taxes and tables. Also, these taxes and tables are also available if you go onto the taxation exam, not the advanced taxation exam. There in the technical article section, you'll find an article on the Finance Act 2020. Click on that article, read that article. It is a must because it will give you all of the updates that have been made into the Finance Act for the people who have passed the taxation exam before March 20. It is a must for them. It will give them a crux of what are the new changes that has been introduced. Also, it will provide you with the most updated rates and tables. Ali Arslan, I'll be teaching you the shortcuts as we'll be solving the question. Obviously, better whenever there is a new Finance Act, the examiner expects that you should have the knowledge of the new updates that have been introduced. Okay, guys, so let's move back onto the question. So that's practice test 1. So as we are starting the question, the first question of the day, I will tell you the most important tip while reading the question is to read the requirement first. In this way, you'll get an idea that when you'll be reading the question, what is that you expect to know and to perform. For example, if I'm reading a scenario and I do not know what I am expected to solve here or expected to tell here, I then, after reading the requirement, have to figure out again. So isn't it better that before reading the scenario, read the requirement first and then start reading the scenario by knowing that what you're expected to tell here? So we'll read the requirement first. It says, in respect of a proposed gift of the warehouse on 1st October 2021, explain why capital gains tax CGT gift relief will be available. So I know that if I have the background knowledge of what CGT gift relief is, I can easily tell and take 2 marks. I know before I start that the gift relief is only available when you gift something that you are using in your business, and the person to whom you are giving will also keep using that in business, and the person needs to be resident from the taxation point of view in UK. If it fulfills all of these conditions, if it fulfills all of these conditions, then the gift relief is applicable. So I can take these 2 marks easily by reading the question and relating my knowledge to the scenario. For example, whatever the it is being gift here, for example, the warehouse is being gift here. Normally the warehouses are used in business. If the warehouse is being used in the business and whatever the recipient of the gift is, he or she is a recipient, he or she is a resident in the UK, the gift relief may be available. Then explain with the supporting calculations. Here you can see the frustration of examiner is clearly telling you that please explain as well and do the calculations, do both. The effect of making a gift relief in respect of the warehouse on the total CGT liabilities of Akil and Dami. I do not know who Akil and Dami are, whether they are related or not. That I'll know by reading the scenario. But here I not only have to perform the calculations, but then have to explain them how gift relief have reduced their tax liabilities if it will be. Then the third part states advise on the availability of business property relief for inheritance tax purposes if Akil dies before 1st October 2028. Okay. Advise on the availability of business property relief for inheritance tax purposes if Akil dies before 1st October 2028. So BPR, I know that is the topic of inheritance tax. Normally, these are the type of questions that are called capital taxes question, in which the individual normally has the problem of two type of taxes, that is inheritance tax and the capital gains tax. It is very common type of question that are being tested in the exams, and there is separate section in the Kaplan exam kit called capital taxes. Underneath you'll find many questions like that, in which the requirements primarily deal with two type of taxes, CGT and inheritance tax. Then explain with supporting calculations. Again, I not only have to explain but provide supporting calculations. However, in the above part, I just have to advise. So here there will be only explanation primarily. Here both. The amount of after tax proceeds which will be available from the sale of the fixed equipment. So he's going to sell something called fixed equipment, and he wants to know what is the money that he'll be receiving into his pocket after paying all sort of taxes, and the tax consequences for both Spydra Limited and Basir of the gift of the motorcycle. So I do not know about that part because I do not have any idea what Spydra and Basir is, but what I know is that it is the pretty common nature of the client. Because he's a layman, he do not have the background knowledge of the taxation. When he comes to consult with a tax expert, his prime question is, what is the amount of money that I'll be getting into my pocket after paying all sorts of tax liabilities? So can, because for example, there's a client, he can tell me I'm going to sell this thing and I'll be able to sell this thing for this amount. The next question I'll be asking is, for how much you have bought this thing? He's going to tell me its price. The difference is his profit. What he wants from me is that what will be the tax that he has to pay, so that he can deduct it from that amount, because that is the money that will be going into HMRC's pocket, not to his pocket. So that is not his money. So he wants to know about his money so he can make decisions accordingly. So that is very common in advanced taxation exam, that you have to calculate the after tax proceeds. Let me tell you, you can score a very easy marks even you have calculated the wrong tax. The selling price will obviously be mentioned in the question. Even if you have calculated the wrong tax amount, if you deduct it from the selling price mentioned in the question and suggest according to that answer, you'll score 1 mark. Why? Because ACCA follows a rule called own figure rule, OFR. What OFR means is that if there is a part that is wrong, they will forget that part and assume that for the remaining part you have taken these assumptions, and then they'll mark accordingly. So if there is any part in between the calculation that you have missed, they'll only deduct the mark for that rather than the complete question. So after reading, I know that it primarily deals with capital gains tax. There are 3 requirements that deals with capital gains tax, and there is one that deals with business property relief, inheritance tax. Now I can start reading the question. ACCA requires advice on the capital gains tax, CGT, and inheritance tax, IHT implications of gifting a warehouse to his daughter, Damia. Okay, so I know that they both are related. Akil is father, Damia is daughter. He also requires advice on tax consequences for a company in which he is a director and shareholder of its disposal and acquisition of certain capital assets. The following exhibit available on the left-hand side of the screen provides the information. The first is scenario and the second is requirement. We have clicked on the requirement and we know what are the requirements, and now we can click on the scenario. While reading the scenario, I'll be looking for 2 things. Whenever there'll be discussion regarding a sale of or a gift of the warehouse, because these are the things with which the first few requirements deals, and then I will be looking that who are Spydra and Basir. Okay, so let's click on the scenario now. Guys, before I start reading the question, can everybody raise their hand and let me know that they can clearly read this PDF that I have opened, or this window that I have opened? Quickly raise your hands. Okay, now Akil and Damia are both resident and domiciled in the UK, are both high rate taxpayers and all relevant tax years. Now this will help me, I will keep this in mind, that whenever I have to perform tax calculations, I remember that for CGT 20% of the rate will apply to all the assets except residential properties. For residential properties the higher rate is 28%. Even for commercial properties the rate is 20%. Only and only for residential property the rate is 28%, and for all other assets the rate is 20%. Akil is a director of 55% shareholding in Spydra Limited. Okay, so Spydra is Akil's company. Will give a warehouse building to his daughter Damia on 1st October 2021. So the date is important. You can click on this highlight feature, and you can highlight the things for your remembrance if you want to. Okay, Akil's warehouse. Akil acquired the warehouse on 1st July 2009 at a cost of 62,000. So I will highlight this as well. It will remind me that this is the cost. The warehouse has always been wholly used rent-free by Spydra Limited since that date. The current market value of the warehouse is 195. So these will be the proceeds that will be used, and this will be the cost. And do remember one more thing, guys, that the warehouse has always been used rent free by Spydra Limited, which means the Spydra is the company of Akil, and indirectly the warehouse is also the asset of Akil. So Akil has been using that asset in his trade throughout, which means it does qualify for gift relief. Only the second thing that I wanted to make sure was whether both are resident, and I can clearly see that by reading the first line that these both are resident. It means I can answer the first requirement, that the reason why the gift relief is available because Akhil has always used the warehouse for business purposes in his trade, and the recipient, that is Damia, is UK resident. Now, but I will hold my answer before I read the complete question so I do not miss any new developments that are in any later stage of the question I can find. So, moving on, Damia will use the warehouse solely in her sole trader business. So Damia will, keep using the asset which is warehouse here in business. Intends to retain and use the warehouse until she sells his business in 5 years time, when warehouse is anticipated to have increase in value. Okay, that's fine. Then Spydra Limited prepare accounts for 30th June each year, is 55% by Akil and 45% by Basir. So I know that who Basir is. He is the other shareholder in the Spydra Limited, uh, with which the last requirement, deals with. Then Basir is not connected to Akil and neither is a director nor an employee of the company. This is very important because I have to remember myself or remind myself the regulations that applies on gifting something to a person who is only shareholder, not a director nor employee, because there are different rules if you are a director and employee. Obviously, if you're a director, you may be an employee as well. If you're a performing director, not a sleeping director. So Basir is neither. Then Spider Limited disposal of equipment. Spider Limited sold an item of fixed equipment for proceeds of 20,000 on 20th August 2021. The equipment had been purchased on 1st May 2015 for 65,000. The tax written down value of Spider Limited's main pool was nil at 30th June 2021. Rollover relief was claimed on the purchase of the equipment to defer a chargeable gain of 38,000. Now, guys, you have to remember several points here. That first, the proceeds of the equipment is 20,000. The equipment had been purchased on 1st May when it had a value of 65,000, which means that when the equipment was sold, it was sold in loss. But you have to remember another thing is that there are different rules when you sell something that is of depreciable nature as compared to the one that you have say that is appreciable in nature. And what is the difference? It is pretty common sense as well. HMRC says that whenever you buy something that is of depreciable in nature, you claim capital allowances for that. What are capital allowances? Tax depreciation or equivalent to depreciation that is provided by HMRC, because HMRC does not allow you to deduct the depreciation expense. They rather give you capital allowances. So HMRC said that we have compensated you for the decline in value by giving you the capital allowances. So if later on you sell something at a loss, we will not be providing you the loss relief for that. Why? Because the reason that the value of the asset has declined because it was depreciable in nature, and we have provided you the depreciation in the form of capital allowances. So that loss is not claimable. Do remember that. However, if I have sell something that is not usually depreciable in nature, but due to certain circumstances, its value, gets fallen. For example, shares. Shares are normally expected to increase in value, but let's say the company is went into litigation and there is some other factors, or the segment of the company is in danger, due to which, or the company is not performing well, due to which the shares are at a level which is lower than at which I have bought the shares. So it means that I'm going to sell the shares at a loss. This loss is claimable. Why? Because shares are not sort of an asset which are depreciable in nature. Secondly, Whenever I have bought the share, HMRC does not give you capital allowances. So now you can claim the loss. Then there is a rollover relief that was claimed on the purchase of the equipment to defer a chargeable gain of 38,000. Now I have to stop here and remind myself that what a rollover relief is. Rollover relief is a sort of a relief that is given to the people who sell any sort of asset that was normally appreciable in nature. So they sell it after a certain time. It's sold at a gain. But rather than putting the money into their pocket, they went on and bought another asset. So let's say assume that I have sold a land that I was using for business purposes for 100,000, and I have bought that land for 70,000, which means that there is a 30,000 of the capital gain I have earned. Let's say after getting 100,000 into my pocket, that is the proceeds, I went on after a certain period of time and bought another land for my business that is for 120,000 pounds, which means the 100,000 that I have received from selling the previous asset, I haven't, put it into my pocket, rather reinvested for the business purposes again. So HMRC says that if you haven't put the money into your pocket, rather reinvest in expanding your business, we will provide you a certain type of relief called rollover relief. What rollover relief will do? It will defer your gain, delay your gain, defer your gain until you sell the replacement asset or the new asset that you have just bought. But there are certain other details of rollover relief which we'll be discussing later on. So he has claimed rollover relief of 38,000. Spider Limited will use the after-tax proceeds from the sale of the item of fixed equipment to purchase a motorcycle, which it will give to besieged. So I guess I first have to calculate the tax that I will deduct it from proceeds, and then I'll be able to calculate the after-tax proceeds which will be available to Spydra to buy a motorcycle for besieged. So guys, before I move on to the requirements, this solution of the requirements, is there any question related to the question specific, please? Okay, so I'll be moving on to the solution. So guys, by clicking on this spreadsheet, this section will pop up, and here you can use it to write your answers. You can open your window side by side as well. For example, if I want to open scenario side by side, I can open that along with my, you know, uh, spreadsheet. Or if I want to open, for example, rather requirements, I can open those along with my question as well. Now, if there are anything that can be copied from the question, you can copy as well by clicking, right click, copy, come here, double click on the cell, paste. Okay, so you can do that as well. Now, let's start with the first requirement. It was pretty easy, so I'll not be typing the solution here. I've already told you. Reason the gift relief is available because the warehouse was a business asset which has been used by Akil for the business purposes throughout his ownership. Number one. And the second is that the recipient of the gift, which we normally call a donee, donor is the one who is donating the thing. Donee is the one who is the recipient of the thing. So the donee in our case is Damya. So the donee is resident in UK. So both conditions of the gift relief have been fulfilled. That is why the gift relief will be available. So 2 marks are for 2 conditions that I have just explained. Spreadsheet I'll be only using for the calculations. Now, for the second part, as you guys remember that, I'll open the question here for you as well, that the property or the warehouse has been bought for 62,000 by Akil. It was, the value was 195 at the time of gift. So let's say assume that if the Akil have sold this property to some unconnected person rather than Damia, what is the gain he would have realized? So it's 162,000, sorry, 195,000 minus 62,000. My mistake, 195,000 minus 62,000. It's 133. This would have been the gain that Akil might have realized if he would have sold the property or the warehouse to some unconnected person. And what is the amount of gain considering he is a high rate band taxpayer at 20%? 26,600 would have been the capital gains tax. Now, because he has gifted, all of this gain would be deferred and Akil will pay zero capital gains tax today. And the gift will be deemed to be transferred to Damia at a cost. So if I give someone something at a cost, I have bought it for 10,000, I give it or I sell it to him for 10,000, what will be the net effect? Zero. So HMRC will assume that the gift has been transferred at a cost. So for me, the gain will be zero and I do not have to pay any capital gains tax. And for Damia, the cost which we normally called base cost. Base cost means assumption, assumed cost. Okay, it is a cost based on assumption. It is not an actual cost. So the base cost for Damia will be 62,000. Do remember, whenever Damia will sell this warehouse outside, whenever she's going to cease her business after the 5 years, the tax that she has to pay will be the difference between whatever the price at that time minus 62,000. Let's say I'm assuming that at that time the warehouse will be for 200,000, then minus 62,000, she may have to pay the tax on 138,000. But today, both of them, neither Akil nor Damia, does not have to pay any capital gains tax. It will be deferred. The gain of 133,000 will be deferred using the gift relief. Okay, so this is the calculation. Now, how will you gonna explain it to the examiner? You have to assume that examiner is your client and he's asking you the question on behalf of Akil and Damia. And guys, please do remember this tip, that you have to remind yourself that examiner is a layman. He does not have a clue as to what the tax is. So if examiner is a layman, he only know that there is some sort of a gift relief. I have to explain him. This is how I explain him. I explain him that due to the availability of the gift relief, all of the gain, that is 195,000 minus 62,000, 133,000, all of the gain of 133,000 arising on the gift will be deferred and no capital gains tax will be payable today. And the Damia will receive the warehouse at a base cost of 62,000. Whenever Damia will sell this asset, she will use this as her cost. Okay, that is one thing. Now, let's say if Damia takes this asset and sells it after 5 years, is there any relief that will be available to Damia? Guys, can you think of any relief that will be available to Damia? Or let's say if the Akil was to sell this warehouse to an unconnected person, is there any CGT relief that will be available to Akil? Guys, there is a relief that is called Business Asset Disposal Relief, BADR. It used to be called Entrepreneur Relief. The students who have passed the taxation exam before March 2020, they know it as Entrepreneur Relief. The criteria of the relief is very much the same. Just the name of the asset has been changed and its limit has been changed as well. It is now called BADR, Business Asset Disposal Relief, which was entrepreneur relief in the past. And there were certain conditions of the entrepreneur relief. You can get the entrepreneur relief, or which is now the BADR, on two type of things. If you sell shares, but you must be an employee of the company of the which you are selling the shares. Second, you must have 5% or more holding before selling the shares. Another type of asset on which BADR was available if you sell something called property plant equipment, but that property plant equipment must be kept for how many years or how many months? 2 years. And you sell it as a result of cessation of the business. If you are continuing the business and out of that continuing business you just sell one asset, you can get the you cannot get the BADR. But if you seize the business and sell all of its asset or some of its assets, then on those assets you can get the BADR. The BADR would not have been available to Akil because he has not stopped trading. Rather, it will be available to Damia because she is planning, after getting the warehouse, to seize her business after the 5 years. So if Damia after 5 years seizes her business and sell the warehouse, then because she has seized the business, and in the question it was written that she intends to use it for business purposes, so assuming that she will keep using it for business purposes until she seizes the business, she has satisfied both of the conditions: the ownership criteria, 2 years or more, and the cessation. So the rate of the tax that is applicable on that disposal will rather be 10% instead of 20%. This is the discount that BADR provides you, that despite of you being a high rate band pair, all of your gain will fall into the 10%. And if you have some basic rate band left, that will go waste because BADR will consume that basic rate band as well. Now, assuming that she will sell it after 5 years, how much is the tax that she has to pay? Assuming that she will sell it for 195 less 62, 133,000, she has to pay 10% of the tax on 133,000. That is obviously 13,300. Now, what is the tax she would have to pay if the BADR would not have been available? 26,600. That is the double of the amount. So half of the amount have been saved. You can express it in the percentages, but it is better to express it in pounds as well along with the percentages. And consider that Akil and Damia are the client of your examiner, and the examiner is a layman. Explain it to him that this is BADR, these are the BADR conditions. You do not have to over explain it. You have to be precise that the gain will be lower due to the availability of BADR. BADR, for BADR to qualify, there needs to be a 2%, 2 years of ownership criteria, and the asset must be used in the asset must be sold as a result of cessation. You do not have to discuss the share thing here. Why? Because the question does not have anything to do with shares. So you can skip the share thing. You just have to explain the criteria or the rule related to the assets. So that is how you have to explain it here. And guys, before I move on, can all of you raise your hands if if you've understood what I meant to say when I was telling you that this is a paper that needs explanation and explanation and explanation. Please raise your hands if you have understood what I was trying to say. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, moving on to the second requirement. Sorry, the third, because we have dealt with the second. The second was that do explain with the supporting calculations, and we have explained. Although I haven't performed the calculations because these are very straightforward, so I've performed on the calculator for you. Now, there are certain students that do ask me, sir, for such type of parts that do require very little calculations. Do we have to use spreadsheet or word processor? It's entirely up to you. If you ask me, I will prefer word processor. Why? Because these are very straightforward calculations. They do not require any formulas or cells or stuff. So please, it's up to you. Not confuse or do not overthink that, oh, will it be right to use the spreadsheet? Will it be right? This is a 20 marks worth of question. There are no professional marks available here. There is no specific format. You can write as you wish. All you have to remember is that your answer should answer all parts of the questions. That's it. Now, moving on. Let's read the requirements. Advise on the availability of business property relief. So guys, you can use my notes whenever you have to, revise any topic. For example, uh, I have chosen a different order, and this is the order I normally, use to teach the students. I normally start with inheritance tax. It's entirely up to you. And then I teach them capital gains tax because they have the background knowledge of income tax after studying a taxation exam or the F6. So that is why I normally start with inheritance tax, then the capital gains tax. And another reason of this sequence is that after studying inheritance tax and capital gains tax, you can attempt capital taxes question from the kit. Otherwise, if you are studying by only studying one type of chapter, you're unable to, uh, you know, attempt any questions from the past papers because there is no question that is being tested on the single type of taxes. So that is my preference. You can choose yours. So in that, let's come on to the BPR and let's see that what is the criteria of BPR. BPR will be available upon both transfers during lifetime and transfers at death through will. But BPR will be available on relevant business property and minimum period of ownership. These are the two criteria. So let's skip to the minimum period of ownership first because it's easy. And the minimum period of ownership is at least 2 years. Whatever the asset on which you want to claim BPR, you should keep it for 2 years before transfer. So guys, what do you think that Akil has kept the warehouse for 2 years before transfer? Yes or no? Yes. So this criteria fulfilled by the Akil. Then what is the relevant business property? Relevant business property is either if you transfer your full unincorporated trade means the trade that has not been incorporated, means that is not a company. So if one is operating and not operating as a company, obviously he will be operating either as a sole proprietor or as a partner, because these are the only three main types of, ways of doing business. So if you transfer someone your complete business, whether it is a partnership or a sole trader business, 100% BPR will be available, no IHT. However, if you choose to transfer certain asset and you do not transfer complete trade, then the BPR percentage will drop to 50% rather than 100%. So guys, you tell me by answering in the question section, which percent will be applicable here, 100% or 50%? Rasha, you have asked me that will I perform the full answer on practice platform? No, because if I'll write or type, this will waste our time because I've already explained what I was about to type. So I will just perform the calculations every now and then to give you an idea as to how to use the practice platform. Because writing is not an issue. Normally the students struggle with the format which they have to make. So I will always tell students that there is no fixed format and examiner will not going to be deduct your marks for the format. So make the format as easy as it can. Yes, Shahriyar, your answer is right. 50% we will use because he has only given one asset, that is warehouse, to Damia. He has not transferred complete trade. However, if it would have been a company and if you transfer the complete shares to someone, then the BPR percentage will again, increase to 100%. So for the complete trade, whether it is unincorporated or corporated or shares, BPR 100%, but for specific assets, it is 50%. Even if you provide securities of quoted trading company, then it is 50% as well. For unquoted, it is 100%. The difference between quoted and unquoted is unquoted, it is a private limited company. It is owned by certain shareholders and its shares are not available to buy in public. Quoted means it is a company that is listed on stock exchange. General public can buy and sell its shares. Now, coming back to our question, advice on the availability for HT if AKIL dies before 1st October 2028. Now, if AKIL gifts the warehouse in October 2021, today the BPR, it will qualify for BPR as it satisfies both condition. AKIL has kept the warehouse for 2 years and AKIL uh, has transferred an asset of his trade. So the BPR will be available, but its percentage will be 50%. As it will be a pet, you know guys that there are two types of transfers, pet and CLT, potentially exempt transfers and chargeable lifetime transfers. Whenever individual transfers something to someone, means the transfer has been made between individuals, it is called pet. As soon as one makes pet, there are no tax implications, so there will be no tax implications at the time of gift. Rather, they will lock the value after deducting the relief. Because the question has not asked me, students, to perform calculations, I will not be performing calculations here. It has only stated advice. So I'll consider that the client is just wants to know. So I will just tell him that yes, you are eligible. Why? Because you satisfies both conditions. Then I will tell him both conditions. Then I will tell him because it is a pet, it will not attract any tax, any IHT right now. And if you manage to live more than 7 years, it will become exempt as well. Damia will not have to pay any tax on this after 7 years. However, if Akil were to die before 1st October 2028, then Damia may have to pay the tax. But if Akil dies after 3 years but before 7 years, Damia will be able to claim taper relief. You guys know about the taper relief, that the taper relief is a sort of a discount that reduces your inheritance tax. That is how I explained. And do remember there is another condition. You know what happens is if somebody gives something to someone and it fulfills the criteria of BPR at the time of gift, but later on that person either sells it or start using it for non-business purposes. If the donor has died and the person, that is the donee, is not the asset or using it for the business purpose at the date of death of the owner or the donor, they may have to pay the tax on that. So the condition of the HMRC is if I am gifting something to someone and we both are claiming BPR on that, the donee has to keep using that asset until I die for business purposes. If before my death he starts using this asset for non-business purposes, the BPR will be withdrawn. But do remember guys, if after 7 years he starts to make a non-business use of that, that is fine, because after 7 years it is out of the scope of IHT anyways, because it will be exempt. So Damia has to wait for 7 years. In that, she cannot use it for non-business purposes, she cannot sell it. If she has to sell it, she has to reinvest it in the same type of asset to tell HMRC that she has not put the money into her pocket. But after 7 years, she is good to go, she can do whatever she wants. So guys, are you okay with that as to what we have to advise? I haven't performed any calculation. Raise your hands if you have understood, please. Okay, now what my method is when I usually conduct webinars is I intentionally spend a bit more time on the first few questions just so the students get used to my technique and used to what I'm trying to tell. And there are a few extra points which one has to explain in the first few sessions, but then we will increase our speed and we doing much more questions in much shorter time, because I'll not be covering the topics in much detail, because there are few topics that will get repeat, so I'll not be explaining them in the later part of the questions. Moving on. Now let's move on to the last part, the part B, as to what we have to do. Here we have to perform the calculations as well. Guys, first thing you have to remember is that the plant or the machine, whatever they have bought, was owned by Spydra Limited. Spydra Limited is a company. Do remember, if the company sells anything at a gain, they have to pay corporation tax on that. So the last part is, has a chunk of corporation tax in that as well. So do remember that. As I told you that the tax written down value, or what we call net book value in normal terms, but for tax it is called written down value of that asset. Let's go to the scenario. This Spider sold an item, fixed item, for the proceeds of 20,000. So it has sold it for 20,000. However, in their main pool, there was nothing, which means in the eyes of the HMRC, the value of their assets were zero. However, they were managed to sell it for 20,000 at a profit. What do we have to do here? Anybody can tell? I have told you what to do if they were sold in loss. You have to ignore the loss. Why? Because the assets were depreciable. But here it is the opposite. A depreciable asset is being sold at a gain. What do we have to do with that? Guys, do remember, if you sell a depreciable asset at a gain, you have to pay the tax. However, if you sell it for loss, you cannot claim the loss. You may find it unfair, but it is not unfair. Reason being, HMRC has compensated you for the loss already in the form of capital allowances. However, it is very unusual that a depreciable asset may get sold at a gain. The reason why here it is being sold at a gain, normally HMRC provides you depreciation of 100% in the first year, but normally the asset does not obviously gets depreciated 100% in the first year. So if the asset has the useful life of 5 years, and you sell it after 3 years, obviously you're gonna sell it at a gain if you compare it with its tax written down value of zero. Now, Spider Limited has sold the asset on 20,000. Its value in the eyes of HMRC was zero, which means they have made a profit or gain of 20,000. As they are a limited company, they have to pay corporation tax of 19% on that. So 3,800 worth of tax will be payable on that. Are we okay till here? Okay, now then there is the rollover relief that they have claimed on purchase of the equipment of 38,000 to defer the gain of 38,000. Now the equipment is being sold, so obviously this gain will be chargeable as well. What happens is, I told you that rollover relief is defers your gain. Now because you have sold the equipment, obviously this frozen gain or this deferred gain will now or today will become chargeable. So this 20,000 on top of that 38,000, these are the two amounts that will be chargeable today. And what will be the amount of tax? 19% flat for companies. 11,200 is the amount of tax. Now, what is the amount of proceeds that are we getting today? Because they have asked us to calculate the after tax proceeds. We are only getting 20,000 proceeds, because this is the old frozen gain that is being chargeable today, but the amount of money that we are actually getting today is 20,000. But out of that 20,000, we have to pay tax of 11,020. So I will deduct 20,000 from that to calculate what is the amount of after tax proceeds that will be available today. It will be 8,980. So I will suggest, or I will tell Spydra that the amount that will be available to you to buy motorcycle for Basir will be 8890. And one last thing that I also want to tell you is that the difference between director shareholder and only shareholder. When the person is director and shareholder as well, we consider it to be an employee. So whenever we provide something to him, we add into his employment income as a taxable benefit. But if he's only a shareholder, not a director, he's not getting any employment income. So we cannot add that benefit into his employment income. Rather, what we do is we treat that we have given this thing to him as a dividend. Obviously, the company is giving motorcycle to Basir. They are not giving cash dividend to Basir. But HMRC will say, consider that you have given Basir motorcycle in the form of dividends. Now, what loss will it make or will it occurs for Basir and for Spydra? Guys, whenever there is something that will be treated as dividend, it will not be able to deduct from the taxable profits. Therefore, it will not provide any tax savings to Spydra Limited. So Spydra Limited is not getting any tax savings because it will be treated as dividend. As far as the Basir is concerned, because Basir is getting it as a dividend, he has to pay income tax on the dividend. So the answer of this part will start from the calculations first, in which you will simply suggest that the 20,000 will be taxable along with the 38,000 gain, and on this 58,000 there will be a 19% tax. After deducting this tax, 8890 will be available to buy the motorcycle. That is one thing. And then in the second point, you will say that this motorcycle will be treated as a dividend distribution for both Basir and Spydra. That's it. In this way, you will explain the answer. However, you remember that it was part of the requirement that we have to support our calculations with the explanation as well. Now, guys, any issues before we move on to a short break? Any questions? Why did I less 20,000? Arsalan, reason being 20,000 was the proceeds or the money he has received by selling the equipment. Less that amount of tax 11,020. 8890 was the after tax proceeds. Shariar, the dividend will be obviously 8890 because we have 8890 to buy the motorcycle. The cost of motorcycle is equal to the amount of dividend. Nabil, we will be making or workings on the questions that we'll be doing afterwards. That includes more calculation. But this question, the first one, does not include it that much calculation. That is why I haven't done any calculation on Excel. But stay with me, we'll be doing some. At the Sham, you have asked what is written down value. In accounting, cost less depreciation equals to net book value. In tax, cost less depreciation equals to written down value. You can say it is the name of net book value in taxation language. In taxation language, to net book value we called written down value, WDV. Arsalan Akram, he has asked me how much money will I have after paying the tax. The tax he has to pay is 11020. The money is he is getting is 20,000. So what is the money left after paying the tax? 8890. So consider two amounts, tax separate and proceed separate, and then deduct. Daniel, no, the motorcycle cannot be treated as an employment benefit because Basir is not a director and employee of the company. It clearly mentioned in the last line of the question. Okay, guys, see you after 10 minutes of break. We will continue after 10 minutes. So, guys, I hope that the first question has helped you. And let's start our second question of the day. It's LIBOR. You can find it on the day-wise question plan. It's the question from December 2018 exam. You can, in the practice platform, you can find it in exam 2, practice exam 2. As the third question, we'll first read the requirements. You can clearly see that it is a 20-mark question. Guys, do familiarize yourself with all sorts of question, 20-mark question, the 35 mark and the 25 mark one. Why? Because as the marks gets increased, the examiner has the wider area and the more freedom of examining more topics. So the lesser the marks of the question, more chances that it will be easy to answer. So when I was a student and I was preparing for this, I knew that my strength will be 20-mark question because I will be able to gain more marks because its requirement are normally easier and shorter. However, when you look at question number 1 or 2 normally, especially the one, its requirements are pretty a bit difficult to understand and they require more elaboration of the concepts and they're not that straightforward as compared to the 20 marks one. So I hope that by attempting 120 mark question, you have learned an approach as to how to understand and how to answer the question. As I have discussed, we'll start with reading the requirement first to understand that what are the topics that are being tested in the exam, and then I will try to remind myself as to what they were and what they were related to. Explain with supporting calculations the capital gains tax implications for LIBOR of the takeover of Vulcan Limited by Mercury Limited on 1st June 2021 and a subsequent sale of his Mercury plc shares on 1st January 2022. Now do remember guys that it is a very common phenomenon in the real world that when there is a company that is performing so well and it is either becoming a competitor for someone or becoming a quite good opportunity for another company to buy it, the company normally takes over the other company. For example, when Facebook launched itself, they were the only kind of a platform for social media. But then there were other platforms like Instagram, like WhatsApp, and others. So, what Facebook did was they bought these other two companies as well. They bought the WhatsApp first, and then they bought the Instagram as well. And then they have some sort of jointed the or merged these apps in a way that can make the user experience more comfortable, and rather if they were owned by three separate companies, the data would not have been shared with other companies of a customer if one has only using Facebook, not WhatsApp. So the interaction between the app may not be as smooth as it is today. So it is a normal phenomena that the company takes over another company and the shareholders that are of an existing company will become the shareholders of the new company. Now, the the takeover normally takes place for with and the consideration is normally paid using either the following ways or the mixture. The first is shares for share consideration, which we call paper based consideration because there is no cash involved. Then there can be cash as well as shares or the cash only, or it can be shares, cash with loan notes. You can find this topic onto my notes as well in the capital gain section in the takeover and reorganization section. That a takeover is when a company acquires shares in another company by issuing either shares only, loan notes, cash, or all three. Now, what we have to do is that whenever a person who was a shareholder in the older company has now become shareholder in the newer company, later on sells his shares, we have to know as to how to compute the capital gains. Why is that? Normally, what happens is if there is a share for share consideration only, there is no cash or loan notes involved. We can assume that because when the takeover happens, there is no actual thing that gets transferred between the shareholders. For example, I will just be notified that I have now become the shareholder of the new company and I have been given this amount of shares as compared to this amount based on my shareholding in the previous company. So I will just be notified. So whenever I will sell the shares of the new company, what is the cost that I have to use? Because I have not paid anything to buy the new shares, I will consider or assume that the cost of my new shares is the cost that what is I have paid for the older shares. For example, I have bought the shares of A Limited for 10,000. A Limited is later on taken over by B Limited, and now I'm going to sell my B Limited shares for 30,000. I know the proceeds, I'm going to sell it for 30,000, but I do not know the cost of my B Limited shares because I haven't bought those actually. They have been given to me as a result of takeover. So what will be the cost? I will assume the same cost for which I have bought the old shares of A Limited. I will take the cost of 10,000 into the calculation, and this is allowed by HMRC because we have no other way of figuring out the cost. The problem arises when there is a share for share consideration along with either the cash or loan notes. So we have to see that what happens in our question. In our question, I can tell you that there is a consideration which involves shares and cash. Now, what happens if the cash involves? HMRC says that now you have to divide the money that you have received into two parts. One, that each of the old shareholder has been given the share of the new company. Secondly, they have also been given some sort of a cash for each share that they own in the old company. The cash that they have received will immediately be chargeable to capital gains tax. You guys will be like, sir, how can the cash gets taxed, because cash does not have any cost and cash is out of scope of capital gains tax? Yes, it is in normal cases. However, in the case of takeover or reorganizations, if you get a cash because the company has been taken over, that cash gain is chargeable. Now, how it is chargeable? You have to divide the money or the wealth you have received in two forms. One is the cash and one is the shares. How we do it? I will perform the calculations shortly when we'll be doing the questions, and then I'll teach you as well. All of the students that were waiting for me to perform calculations on the practice platform, this is the question in which we'll be doing that. Now let's back to the question. On to the second requirement. First, we know now that it deals with the takeover and we have to perform the calculation. We then have to explain, and explain as well. Do remember, even if the examiner has not stated, you have to explain. Unless or until the marks are such low that you feel that the explanation is not required. For example, if it was for 3 to 4 marks, I would have realized that the explanation is not necessary here. But here it has clearly mentioned explain with support of calculations, which means I have to perform the both. In second, I have to do as well that explain with supporting calculation why it will be beneficial for Liber to sell his Mercury PLC shares on 1st May 2020 instead of 1st January 2022. Guys, always remember that there will be something that is benefiting him. Normally what happens is, if you sell the shares today, you may be getting you may not be getting some sort of relief which you will get if you sell it later on. That may be the one case. There is a case that you may have a higher rate on which you have to pay tax today, and in the future you may have a lower rate to pay the tax. That can be the case. You may have the annual exemption or the losses available later on rather than today. That can be a basis of choice. So there are certain choices which can you know uh, maneuver my decision as to whether I should sell something today or in the future. So we'll study after, or we'll read the question first, and then we'll figure out what is the case here. Then part B, advise Vesta whether or not there are any capital gains tax or inheritance tax advantages for herself or Janus if she were to gift investment property to Janus on December 31st, 2021, rather than leaving it to him in her estate on death. I do not have the idea as to what these characters are, Liber, Janus, Vesta, but I do know that part B relates to IHT and CGT. So whoever this Vesta is, he or she wants to gift an investment property and she wants to know regarding the CGT implications and the IHT. Again, you can clearly see, guys, the word is advise, which means I will not be performing any calculations here. Okay, so I will just be explaining it to you verbally. However, for part A and part B, we'll be performing calculations in the Excel. Now, before I move on to the scenario, is there any specific question related to the question, guys? Okay, there's one question by Arslan that what should be the order of attempting the questions in the exam? For example, student do ask me, sir, whether we should start with section B questions, whether we should start with section A questions. Guys, let me tell you, it is entirely up to you, your choice. There is no such preference. However, in my personal opinion, there is a reason as to why you should attempt section A questions first. I believe, guys, that they do require a lot of knowledge and they drain your brain because they require a lot of detail, a lot of concepts are required. So when you sit into the exam, you are fresh for the first few hours, so you should opt for the difficult task in the first few hours rather than the easy one, and use your ability for the difficult questions that are normally the section A questions. So I would advise to attempt question 1 and question 2. Also, these are the questions that take much of your time. So if you have unfortunately spent more time on your section B, you're obviously left with less time for section A. And section A question cannot be completed in lesser times. Section B question you may be able to pull off with lesser time. However, obviously you're going to hamper the quality. So these are the two reasons. The time management will become easier and you have a fresh mindset. That is why I will suggest that you should. However, there is no such preference by examiner or by any official guidelines provided by ACCA. So I will suggest that you should either follow your own preference, or if you think my points are valid, you can start from question number 1. Now, moving on to the question. Guys, if you have any question in mind, you can put into the question section. Whenever I'll be reading the questions, I will answer it then. So if you have any question pops up in mind, you can, put it in the question box after every requirement. When I'll be reading the question, I will answer it then. Now, Liber is a UK resident and domiciled, has taxable income of 30,000 a year, which means he's a basic rate band payer. However, he does not have complete basic rate band left. The basic rate band is 37,500, so he has 7,500 of the basic rate band. Any of the gains that are above 7,500 will be taxed at 20% or 28% if it will be residential property only. Now, Liber acquisition of ordinary shares in Makri PLC. Liber purchased 800 shares, 40% holding, 14,000 on 1st July 2011. Mercury then acquired 100% of the share capital of VP PLC. An exchange of each ordinary share in V, Liber received the following: 4 ordinary shares in MPLC, which were valued 20 after the takeover, and £15 cash. So guys, I will stop here and I will request you to tell me the number that if Liber has 800 shares in old company, that is V Limited, how much shares will he have in the new company if he'll get 4 shares for every old shares? 4 new shares for every old share. How much will gonna get? Right, 3200, that is 800 times 4, 3200. And guys, if he has to get 15 pound cash for every 15 pound cash for every old share, how much cash will it be then? It's 15 times 800, 12,000, right? Now, do remember these two figures, 3,200 shares and 12,000 cash. Moving on, Mercury has 200,000 issued ordinary shares. So you can calculate that 3,200 divided by 200,000, that he has almost 1.6% holding in the company. That is one thing. Liber has never been a director or employee of either V Limited or MPLC, which means that he will not be able to the BADR. Why the BADR comes into my mind whenever an individual sells shares, always BADR comes into my mind, and I always look for that, did he had 5% holding and was he the employee of the company? If not, then BADR not available. If yes, then BADR is available. The takeover was bona fide commercial reasons and not for the avoidance of tax, and that is the HMRC's condition. So we're going to copy paste it as it is, that because the takeover was for the bona fide commercial reasons and not for the avoidance of tax, uh, the gain on the shares will not be taxable. Only the gain on the cash will be taxable. How will it be taxable? I will perform the calculations with you. For now, let's move on to the question. Liber proposed transaction in MPLC. Liber now wishes to sell all of his shares in Mercury PLC. If I go above, the share was valued at 20 after the takeover, and Liber had 3,200 shares, which means if we sell each share for 20, the proceeds will be 64,000. He has received an offer for an unconnected person to purchase these shares, and he has offered a price of 28. So 28 times 3,200 means 89,600 will be the proceeds if he were to sell the shares to that person. Liber would prefer to sell shares to his nephew Janus. Okay, now I know who's Janus. He is the nephew of Liber. I still don't know who Vesta is. However, this would delay the sale as his nephew will not have unnecessary funds to purchase shares until 1st May 2020. Okay, now I got it as to why he has to delay he may has to delay the disposal to May 2022, because he may choose to sell it to his nephew and the nephew will not be able to pay till May 2020. He's getting higher amount of money rather than today? No, the Janus will also pay him 28 per share. It is clearly said, Janus has said he will also pay 28 per share. That's fine. Now, Vesta is a 6-year-old and has never married to or had a civil partner, is in ill health and is expected to die at some time, has made no disposals for CGT, which means if he has made no disposals for CGT, uh, complete annual exemption is available. Guys, do remember these lines are very important. Has consumed his nil rate band or has not consumed his nil rate band, or has not made any disposals or has made disposals. These do make a lot of difference in your calculations. So do remember that the examiner is always trying to give you hint what type of exemptions or reliefs are available and what not. For example, he has given you a hint by telling you these two things, that BADR is not available. Here he is telling you that annual exemption is available because he has not made any disposals in the this tax year, and he will not make, as so the annual exemption will be indifferent whether he disposes of anything today or in the future. Now, has made one previous lifetime gift of 350 to her son Janus. Okay, so Vesta is father of Janus, and Liber is uncle of Janus. Why? Because Janus is nephew to Liber and Janus is son to Vesta. Why this is very important? Because he has made 350,000 of a gift to tell me that there is no NRB left for Vesta. And whatever he has to give from now onwards, no NRB is left and it will be taxable if he were to die. So the last requirement deals with Vesta investment property. Vesta owns an investment property which has never been used as a main residence. That's fine. It is again a hint that PPR or the residence nil rate band is not available. The residence nil rate band is or relates to the IHT, and PPR, that is the principal private residence relief, relates to the CGT. The current market value of the property is less than the price paid for it, which means the property is loss making and its value is expected to fall further throughout the tax year, and the property will be more loss making. Guys, I'll stop here and you tell me, if something is loss making, let us discuss from the CGT's point of view first. If something is loss making and I am about to give it to someone, shall I give it to him today or shall I wait that this thing will get transferred at my death? Because there will be no CGT. Rather, I'll give him today or on my death because it is a loss making. But what should I do? And shall I wait till that death or shall I do it today? Okay, let's discuss the perspective of both the Janus and the Vesta. Will it make any difference? Answer me in yes or no. Will it make any difference for Vesta whether she gifts the asset right now or wait till death? From the CGT's point of view, I'm asking. Will it make any difference for Vesta? All of the guys who are saying no are right. Why? Because as far as the CGT is concerned, she does not has to pay any CGT whether she gives the asset today versus at death. There will be few students that say no sir, if she gives it today she will be able to realize the loss, okay, and thus she will be able to capitalize this capital loss. But guys, the capital loss will only be beneficial for him if he has any capital gains to set off against these losses. If it does not have any capital gains, this loss is useless for him. So I guess for Vesta, it does not make any difference if he or she does not have any capital gains available to set off against these losses. Now, let's discuss Janus point of view. What will be the best for Janus? To get the asset now or to get the asset at death? Now versus death. Okay, Rasha, I agree with your answer, but I'll be needing explanation. The students who are saying now, explain me the reason as in a as precisely as you can. Why shall I, as a Janus, take the gift now? All of those who are saying pet value locked, this is from the IHT's perspective. I am asking from the CGT's perspective. Ravi, you're very much right. As far as the Janus is concerned, if he will get the property today from his father, it will have a higher cost. If he will wait for death, the property will fall in value, and at death he will inherit the property at the probate value. What is probate value? Probate value means value at the death. So the value will be lower, and let's say if later on the value of the investment properties gets up, Janus will get the benefit if he has the higher cost because it will result in lower gain eventually. However, if Janus will wait till death, let's say I'll explain you with numbers now. For example, let's say the property is worth 100,000 today, and Vesta bought it for 150. So obviously it's in loss right now. But Vesta is expecting that the property will even fall to 80,000 by the time of his death. If he gifts it to Janus today, for Janus its cost will be 100,000. However, if Janus inherits it on death, its cost will be 80,000 for Janus. Later on, if the property gets revalued and the value of the property gets increased later on, in which way the Janus will get benefit? With 100,000 cost, he will get a lower gain, or with the 80,000 cost? 100 or 80? 100,000. That is what I'm trying to explain. That for Vesta it is indifferent, because even if he gives him the property right now or at a death, he will realize a capital loss which he cannot offset because he does not have any gains. However, for Janus it is beneficial if he gets the property right now, because it will result in a higher cost rather than getting it at a death. I have just discussed CGT's perspective. I haven't discussed IHT's perspective till now. Now I will move on to the IHT's perspective. Guys, tell me, will it make any difference? For IHT's perspective, get now or get a death? Get now or get a death for IHT? No CGT considerations now. IHT only. All of you who are saying death, let me tell you, there is no difference. Why? Let's assume that Janus choose to get the property right now. If he choose to get the property right now, it will be considered as a pet, its value will be locked. But because its value will fall by the time of death, Janus will not gonna pay the IHT on the locked value. He'll gonna claim the fall in value relief from HMRC. And what fall in value will gonna do? It will decrease the value to 80,000. And in the second situation, if he gets it at the death, he will get it directly on 80,000. So what do you think? Will it make any difference if he gets it at 100 and then claim fallen value relief and then makes it to 80, or he'll get it on 80 directly? Any difference? No difference. So it doesn't matter whether he get it now versus get it at death. And for Vesta, it will make no difference. Why? Because Vesta is donor here. Vesta will gonna die, so Vesta does not have to pay IHT anyways. Guys, IHT is always paid by, unless or until it is a CLT, always paid by donee. Because when the person died, obviously he cannot come back from the grave and pay tax. So it's the donees who pay the taxes on pets. So for Janus, it does not make difference whether he gifts it today or at a later stage. All of the students who were saying, sir, now because it will be a pet, its value will be locked. It would have been beneficial. It would have been beneficial if it would have been an asset that will increase in value. Then it would have been beneficial. You would have said, sir, please choose the correct answer, and it will be right now. Why? Because when at the time of death, let's do it opposite. Today the value is 100,000 and Vesta believes that at the death the value will be 130. So obviously Janus would have opted for right now, because the value would have been locked, less annual exemptions, and at death he has to pay the tax on 100,000. Otherwise he would have to pay 130. So HMRC gives you relief both ways. If the value is increase in, if the asset of increase in nature, then the value will be locked and you will get benefit from the locked value. If the asset is such of nature that it will decrease in value, you can claim fall in value relief. Now, let me take you to my notes and let me take you to fall in value relief just to review what it is. Fall in value is normally is whenever somebody gifts to someone, it becomes a pet and the value gets locked. And whenever that person dies, regardless of whatever the market value is, the person has to pay the tax or the IHT on locked value. But this is the case when the asset is of such nature that has increased in value. So HMRC gives you the benefit by allowing you to pay the tax at locked value rather than paying the tax at market value. If the opposite gets happen, which is the case in our question, that rather than increasing in the value, the asset gets decreased in value, HMRC compensates you at that side as well. HMRC says that, let's say when you bought the asset, when you received the gift of the asset, its value was 100,000. So the pet's locked value is 100,000, but today today the market value is 70,000. We do not ask or order you to pay the tax on 100,000. We allow you to claim the relief of 30,000, decrease your value to 70, and pay the tax on 70 respectively. There are certain conditions. The first condition is that the asset is retained by the donee at the death of donor. So let's say Mr. A has gifted me something. The value was 100,000 at that time. He has now died, and the asset has become chargeable. I now have to pay IHT, and I still own the asset. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna reduce its value. For example, it's 70,000 now, so I'm gonna pay the tax on 70,000. Sometimes what happens is it's difficult to hold an asset whose value is decreasing. So there is a chance that somebody gifted me something and I couldn't wait for their death, and I've sold the asset because I was afraid that it will gonna increase my loss further if I will not sell the asset. What then? For example, let's say the person gifted me the asset, its value was 100,000. I sold it when its value was 85,000, and now its value is 70,000 when he has died. On which value will I pay the tax? Locked value of 100,000, market value of 70,000, or is there any in between value that is 85,000? The correct answer is 85,000. Why is that? HMRC said that you have suffered the loss of 15,000 and you sold the item when it was worth for 85. You haven't kept it till the date of death. So you haven't realized the loss of 30,000. You have only realized the loss of 15,000. If you sell the property before the death of the donor and the value of the property has decreased, you can claim the loss only till the point you have sold the property, which in my example is 85. But if you retain the property, you can claim the complete loss. So I guess I have now explained the fallen value relief as well. Can everybody raise their hands if they have understood till what we have studied now? Thank you. Now, moving on to the question back. Janus is the sole beneficiary state. So guys, I can now suggest them that there are two point of views. One was the CGT. For the CGT point of view, I have first explained Vesta. Vesta is indifferent, but for Janus, it is better to get the gift now as it will result in a higher cost. For IHT, both are indifferent. Vesta is indifferent anyways because he does not has to suffer IHT, and Janus is indifferent as well because either way he'll be paying the tax on the decreased value. That will be the value on death. Now, we have covered the part that does not require any calculations, so we can now move on to the part that does require the calculations. Okay, so let's come back to this part. First of all, let me tell you how to perform the calculations when there is a takeover. Before, let me answer if there is any question asked. Arsalan, no, this relief is automatic. You will pay the tax on 70,000 as per my example anyways. So 70,000 times 40%. But in this question, we don't have any figures. We just have to suggest. Okay, now let's open spreadsheet and let's open scenario along with the spreadsheet so we can take the figures from there. Okay, guys. Now, whenever there is a takeover, you always have to make two columns. First is market value. To remember this pattern, it's pretty easy. The second is cost. This is how you increase the width of the column. I guess all of you know that already. I have bold and underline by selecting this. This is for bold and U is for underline. Okay. Now, market value, we'll write there were two items involved. One was shares, one was cost. Now, I will increase the width of this. How much shares did I got? 3200. Everybody remembers that I got 3200. And what was the market value immediately after the takeover? It was 20. Then, sorry, I've mistakenly written cost. I was supposed to write cash. What was the amount of cash? You can either calculate yourself or you can put an equals to sign here. What equals to sign does is whatever you will write from now onward, it will perform the calculation. Steric sign is normally used for the multiplication in spreadsheet. 64,000. What was the amount of cash? For cash, old 800 shares times 12 pound cash for every shares. You guys said it was 12,000. Was it 12 pound or sorry 15 pound? We will edit our formula from the formula bar above 12,000. Here we will apply the sum formula as well and we can individually add the figures. You have to press equals to sign, then select the first cell, then press plus and then select the second cell. What it will gonna do is it will add both of items, but do remember an equals to is a must. Otherwise you cannot perform this function. All of addition, multiplication, subtraction, division cannot be performed by putting an equals to at the very start. Here I will just write 14,000. Why is that? Guys, do remember I have, let's say, bought one pencil for 1000 rupees or 1000 pounds. One of you comes up to me and offer me, sir, if you sell your this one pencil to me, I will give you, rather than cash, I will give you two pencils in return. And sir, the value of each pencil is 7.5. So I was like, okay, fine. It means then whenever I'll be selling both pencils, I will gonna get 15 pounds instead. So I will sell you one pencil and I will get two in return. But guys, what I am unsure is what is the individual cost of each pencil, because I haven't bought them by using cash. I have bought them using barter. Barter means I have given you something and you have given me in exchange something as well. There was no involvement of cash. When this is the case, we have to split the cost using our percentage method. Means that I have gotten one thing, I have gotten two things instead of one. So I've given one thing and I've received two. So if both of the new items are equal in value, what I'm gonna do is I will split the cost between two. Let's say I have bought the one pencil for 1000 and I have given you this pencil and you have given me two pencils. Each pencil was 7500 each. It means that newer assets are 15,000 and the old 750 each. So 750 times 2. Newer pencils are 1500. Older pencil was 1000. What if I have tell one pencil? I do not have the cost of one pencil because I haven't bought it using the cash. What I'm gonna do is I'll split the cost between two, 50-50. Why? Because the market value of the both pencils are equal. So I will split the equal cost to both. I will allocate 500 to each pencil. Now what we have to do here, we know that we have bought 14,000 worth of shares, which somebody bought from us and given us things worth of 76,000. What were these things? Out of that, 12,000 was cash and 64,000 was shares. I now have to allocate the cost for two. My cost was 14,000 because I've originally paid 14,000 for one item that was share in old company. How do I allocate this cost to these two items? What I'll do is I will take the percentage. This divides by this times 100. So this times this. I do not have to perform multiply 100 because I have already selected percentage from the above. So out of total market value 76,000, 84.21 percent market value relates to shares. I can take this formula and paste it here. Now let me check out of total market value, how much market value does the shares have? I then click here and apply the percentage. 15.79. I think what I should do is I should, out of this 14,000, allocate 15.79 cost to cash and 84.21% cost to shares. So now what I'm gonna do is I'll take this and I will multiply it by this. What you can do is you can select whatever type of method you want to select. For example, how much zeros you want to apply. You can go into the format and select it from here. What I'm gonna do is I'll simply select it from here. 11789 is the assumptionary cost that I have allocated to shares. Guys, do remember it is not an actual cost. I'm just assuming that I spent 14,000, gotten two items. Out of those, 64% value was related to shares and 15.79 to cash. So I have used the same percentage to allocate the cost. This multiply by this. 15.79 cost or relates to this. Now I will again adjust the pattern to this, or I can use this. You can manually check that whether it equals to 14,000. It does. So it means I have splitted the cost quite well. Now, the reason why I have done all of this working, I can again bold them as well, just to tell examiner that these are my totals. Now there will be few students asking me, sir, let's say we do not have ample amount of practice of applying formulas. Will it be fine if we just post the numbers there? Will the examiner be deducting our any marks? No. The answer is no. If you just tell him by putting this brackets as to how you have calculated the figure, that's fine. You can do this on your calculator 3200 times 20 and write 64,000 directly here. You'll score equal marks. Even if you apply the formula, even if you don't. Same is the case with Section A questions as well. Okay, so the answer to your question that, sir, is applying the formula necessary, is no, it is not necessary. Now why I have done this calculation, because HMRC says that whenever there is a takeover and it involves shares and cash both, the amount of gain that is chargeable on cash is immediately chargeable. However, the cash gain, it will be deferred until you actually sell this new shares. So I've gotten 3,200 new shares, but this gain will not be chargeable unless I sell these new shares. What about cash? Obviously, I'm not going to sell the cash. Cash never gets sell. Cash is utilized. So HMRC's rule is that the gain that is attributable to cash will immediately be chargeable. I know the market value of the cash. What I don't know was the cost. I have made an assumption that out of 15.79% of my old cost relates to cash, I can now perform gain calculation. That proceeds of my cash was 12,000 and my cost was equals to this. What is it will gonna do is it will gonna copy the amount here. I can then select the format from here, that is this. You can select the cells and select the format at once. Now what it's gonna do is I do not have to select the format again and again. This is my proceeds less this is my cost, so this is my gain on. I will again bold it. You can use the shortcut key of Control B, or you can press this B sign as well. This is my gain on cash. It will immediately be chargeable. There is no relief available and LIBOR cannot defer this gain. However, then LIBOR is now thinking of selling the shares, and he is thinking that he can either sell the shares right now at 28 and he can delay the sale to 2022 and is still gonna get the same proceeds. So let's see that how much gain he will gonna make. Either way, proceeds will remain 28 multiplied by 3,200 shares, 89,600. Cost will be that I have allocated above, 11,789. Gain will be this minus this. This will be my gain. Now, if he wishes to sell both I mean this he has no choice, he has to pay tax this year, but this he has choice. If he decides to sell the shares as well right now to an unconnected person and does not wishes to wait for 2022, both of these gains will get taxed. So the total gain will be this gain plus this gain. 87,600 will be the total gain, less annual exemption amount. AEA stands for annual exemption amount. Abbreviations are perfectly allowed in exams. And what is the amount of annual exemptions, guys? It's 12,300. You can write minus 12,300 as well if you want to. What will be the taxable gain then? This. Now I'll put plus sign because plus minus will equals to automatically minus. 75,300 will be the gain that will be chargeable today if I wish to get both of my gains taxed today. Now, normally all of this gain would have been taxed at 20% considering if he is a high rate band payer. But I remember from the question that his incomes are 30,000 each year, which means that he has 7,500 of basic rate band left as well. So when I have to calculate his tax liability, I will write here CGT will be, I will bold this, 7,500 at the rate of 10%. Here I can apply the formula if I wish to, obviously. It's your choice if you don't want to. Then the remaining gain, what is the amount of remaining gain? The remaining gain will be the total gain less 7,500. And my total gain was 87,600 less 7,500, whatever the amount is, that will be taxed at 20%. Here we will figure out by pressing an equals to sign. We'll open a bracket as well because there are two calculations in one equation. It is this minus 7500 that we first have to figure out. Whatever our final answer will be, that we have to multiply it by 20%. So it's 16020. What will be my total CGT liability? It will be this plus this. This will be my total CGT if I wish to sell both of the items. I mean, for cash, I do not have the choice, but for shares, I do have. If I sell the shares this year as well, this will be my total CGT. Now I will stop here and I will ask you guys to think what will happen if I decide to sell the shares or delay the share disposal till 2022 and sell it to my nephew. That is for sure that the gain will be the same. Why? Because he's offering me 28 as well. Cost will gonna remain the same. Will it make any difference? Answer me in the question section. Guys, will it gonna make any difference? Sorry, Shahryar, I've done that part wrong. You are absolutely right in highlighting that I've taken the wrong figure. I should have taken my total gains. And my total gains are this gain and this gain. So 87,600 was my total gain, but I should have taken 75,300. So if you make such type of mistake, it is very easy to correct your answer. What you will gonna do is, I have here selected B18. I have rather should have selected this thing. So I can drag my mouse to this cell, select the right cell, then press the enter. And because I've put the formula, he has not only updated this calculation, but it has updated this calculation. However, if you were to do this on paper and you have made a mistake, you would have to cross everything and to write again. So there are certain advantages of the CBE exams as well. Now, let me quickly explain what I have done here. The share bit was easy. As I told you that I had old 800 shares, I have received 4 new shares each. 8 times 4 equals to 3200 shares. I was getting an offer of 28 per share, so that makes it 87,600. The cost I have calculated above 11789, so that was my gain on share. I've also told you how I've calculated the gain on cash. Total gain was cash gain and share gain less annual exemption. 75,300 was chargeable gain. 7,500 basic rate band was left because my income tax incomes are 30,000. So that gain taxed at 10% and the remaining gain taxed at 20%. That is the higher band. So guys, now everybody understood? Answer me in yes and raise your hands as well. Thank you. Now we were discussing what will happen if he wishes to delay the sales. Will he gonna get any advantage? Ravi, you are absolutely right. If he delays his share sale and he, which decides to sell the shares rather than to unconnected person to his nephew, what will happen is I will press the delete sign just to tell you that he will have to pay any CGT. CGT cannot be negative. Reason why my answer is negative is because my taxable gains are less than 12,300. I can tell you this way as well. If I do not sell shares My total gain this year will be 9789 because I haven't sold the shares. This 9789 will be covered by annual exemption and I will not have to pay any tax this year. Now, when I will sell the shares to my nephew in May 2022, that will be the next tax year, new annual exemption of next year will be available. What the next year annual exemption will gonna do, it will decrease my gain by 12,300. This year I have two disposals. If I choose to delay this disposal, I will have one disposal this year which will be covered by annual exemption, so no tax, and one disposal next year which will not be covered by annual exemption, but its gain will be lowered by annual exemption. This year, complete annual exemption is not available to me for shares. Why? Because I have cash gain as well. So that is one difference. BADR will obviously not available in both cases because he has not been the employee. So the only difference is the annual exemption that it will be available to both of the disposals if he decides one disposal each year. Now, few students are asking me, sir, how you have computed 7,500 at 10%, guys? It's pretty easy. The basic rate band is 37,500. Out of that, 30,000 has been utilized in income tax, and that is mentioned in the question. His taxable income for income tax is 30,000, and you guys know that basic rate band limit is same for both. It is not that basic rate band is separate for income tax and separate for CGT. So it is the same limit. So 7,500 has been left from there. So that will be taxed at 10% and the remaining will be taxed at 20%. So the only difference or the only benefit you should rather say will LIBOR realize by delaying the sale is that he will get two annual exemption amounts rather than one. Secondly, if he has 7,500 basic rate band this year available and his income in the question examiner mentioned that will remain 30,000 each year, it means that the 7,500 basic rate band will be available as well. So let us calculate the revised tax liability here as well, assuming that he wishes to delay the sales. Gain gonna remain the same. I will copy this calculation. So first 7,500 will still be taxed at 750, but what will be the remaining gain? Now annual exemption will be available for this item. So just to calculate our calculations right, let me add another column here. Let's copy that here as well. Assuming he wishes to sell it the next year, the gain will be 77,881. Now, because it is the next year, complete annual exemption will be available to this transfer, that is 12,300. So what will be the taxable gain? 65,511. That will be the taxable gain now. Why? Because the complete annual exemption is available to this transfer now. Out of that, 7,500 will still be available because his incomes will gonna remain 30,000 each year. So each year he has 7,500 available. 7,500 will be taxed at 750. Whatever the remaining gain is, that is 65,511 minus 7,500, that will be taxed at 20%. Now here we can do this calculation, that is equals to this minus 7,500 times 20%, and our total tax will be this plus this. This is our total tax. Now, to check that how much savings have we made in scenario A, he had to pay this amount of tax. In scenario B, he's paying this amount of total tax. These are the resultant savings, 1958. So if he chooses to delay his sale till next year and he sells it to his nephew, he will be able to save tax of £2,000. That is almost £2,000, 1958 to be exact. These are the savings. Now, it is always better to tell the client the after tax proceeds. So what you can do here is you can add your proceeds that, for example, here the proceeds are 89,600 less 1958. This will be the money he'll gonna get in this situation. However, if we'll take this scenario first, the total gains are 87,600 and less the total taxes 14310. So now let's dedicate the last 15 minutes to your questions. This was a quite complex question, so obviously you guys are gonna have loads of questions. Okay. Yes, Ravi, the cash gain will gonna tax at first year. You do not have any advantage. Arslan, have you now understood? I have tried to explain as in an easy way as I can. Uh, Daniel, you're absolutely right. You can use different worksheets for different question. It is totally allowed. But if you are asking that you can use different spreadsheets, that is not the option that is available. What you can do is you can add a new sheet from here. Or what you can do is, let's say this was the part A. For example, if this was the part A, I can mention on the top that these are the calculations that belong to part A. Then at the bottom, I can write that from here part B starts, so to tell the examiner, and then I can perform the part B calculation. One thing which you guys can do is you can use both the spreadsheet and the word processor. For example, I've done the calculation, now I have to explain. I'll come here, I'll say B, and I'll start writing whatever I want to. And I'll write here for calculations, see spreadsheet. In this way, examiner will be able to know that the explanation is here, but the calculations have been done there. These are, for example, you can now clearly distinguish between the last question and this one, that this has more complex calculations. You have to use the spreadsheet now, but there you will be able to get away with the word processor only. And you can, because the calculations were not that complex, you can, clearly mention on the spreadsheet, on the word processor easily. So that is the difference I wanted to teach you by solving these two different type of questions. One needed the calculations, and for one the calculations were pretty straightforward. Okay. Fahim, the examiner will gonna find himself if you will not give the reference, but it's always best to make the life easy of the examiner. It will gonna help you. So always try to give references between the spreadsheet and the word processors. Clearly tell him that the following explanation relates to which part, so it becomes easy for him. Arsalan, I do not prefer any such solution. I will suggest you to decide on the nature of the question. If the question is of such nature, for example, the LIBOR question, use both. If the question is like the last question, Akil and Damia, use only word processor. So you have to make your judgment in the exam. I cannot suggest you that you should only use this or you should only use this. If you're comfortable to do all calculations on word processor and you're not comfortable to put formulas, you can solve the complete question on word processor as well. But I'm not gonna suggest that. I will ask you to use your judgment and make the best of both. More questions, guys? Any questions related to the question or the paper or how we are going to proceed with these webinars? Anything? Uh, Arsalan and other students who sometimes ask me about the impact on web examiner. Sir, if we solve like this, will it leave a good impact? Will it leave a bad impact? Uh, there's a good and there's a bad thing. The good thing is in section B, even if it does lead a bad impact, he cannot deduct your marks as far as your calculations are right. But in section A, if your pattern is such that it leaves a bad impact, he has the power to deduct professional marks. So I will recommend that always try to improve your impression through exam by making your pattern as easy as it can, referencing to everything, clearly mention that which answer leads to which part, do references between the word processor and spreadsheet, clearly tell him that this is the answer of this part, and try to make his life easier. Do not try to leave bad impact because he has the power in section A to deduct those your marks. Arslan Akram, that's perfect if you are complete. If you are more comfortable on solving the paper on Excel, then do it. You have the option to write in the cells as well. So that is perfectly fine. You can solve the answer on the spreadsheet as well. Yes, Fahim, let me give a few tips at the end of as to how the students can manage the time in the exam. The first step is that practice, practice, and practice on computer. And with the help of learning curve, try to reduce your time or solving a question on computer. First of all, try to do that. Secondly, try to learn some tricks and tips which I am teaching you. For example, the use of formulas, use of equals to, use of sum formula, yeah, to save your time. This will help you to save your time as well. Number one, practice. Number two, help of formulas. Number three, try to solve questions in time pressure by using the stopwatch at home to figure out normally how much does it take you to solve a question. For example, everybody has smartphones nowadays. It has smartwatch in it. Apply the smartwatch, uh, a stopwatch, sorry. Apply the stopwatch and start solving the question and leave the stopwatch aside. You do not have to check as to how much time you spent in the middle of the question. Solve the question calmly and then look at the stopwatch as to how much time have you taken. If it is 15 to 20 minutes that you have taken more, that can easily be managed by practicing more. If you're taking like an hour longer, you have to, seriously check that where are you struggling. So that is one thing. Try to find out first how much is the difference between your time versus the time in which you should complete the question. For example, the first question number one is for 35 marks. 35 marks times 1.8 is 63. You can take 60 to 70 minutes to complete this question. Why? Because in that you have four professional marks for which you do not have to write separately. So 4 times 1.8, you have 7 minutes extra anyways. Still, you can take 7 more minutes and you can write it into 70 minutes. Then for the next question, 25, you have 1.8 marks. You have 45 minutes. You can take 45 to 50 marks as well. 45 to 50 minutes as well to do that question. But now, if you have completed the first two questions and you have consumed 10 more minutes or 15 more minutes of your section B, you have 7.5 minutes each section B question lesser than usual. Normally, section B questions are for 25 marks, so you have 38 minutes, but now you have almost 30 minutes. But what my experience is, even if you have like few, let me again emphasize, even if you have only few minutes short in section B question, you can solve them. Why? Because their answers are not that comprehensive, they are not that difficult. There are certain parts which require just explanation, and explanation can does not usually take that time. So for section B, you may be able to cover up, but section A normally does take time and it is very unusual. Or if you were able to do that, it will be best if you will be able to do that, complete that in the given time, which means that 60 marks times 1.8, you have almost 108 minutes, which means 1.5 hours, just above 1.5 hours. So try to solve like 3 times question A and question B on Excel, and check yourself how much time have you taken as compared to 108 minutes. If you are taking 15 minutes more, 20 minutes more, still you can, take the help of other techniques. If you're, doing it an hour longer, I will not be able to suggest anything but to improve and seriously look into what mistakes are you doing. So guys, any more questions? Okay, guys, this is one more common question, sir. We have this amount of days left. We have, done revising the notes. We have attempted certain question. What to do in the remaining days? Guys, first of all, text is of such nature that it tends to forget after few days. I will suggest not to solve all the questions in the practicing kit or the practice to pass platform. Leave a few questions for the last few days, please. Why? Because if you'll solve everything and you will not study the tax regularly, you'll forget the rules even if you have solved the question yourself. So leave few questions for yourself for the last few days. That is one thing. Meanwhile, it's better to, interact with tax daily, either by revising notes or by solving one question at least, if you have that much days left, or if you have only ATX exam. If not, then one thing is for sure, that you need to interact daily with the exam. Why? Because you're gonna forget it if you'll not be interacting with it. Another tip is make a list of the topics. Everybody has this. I have figured it out from my experience that everybody knows that, sir, for me in advanced tax, these are the topics that no matter how many times I revise, I forget it after few hours. I'll suggest to make the list of those topics and do revise only these topics just before the exam, because your mind, you know tends to uh, save those for few hours only. So it's best to revise them immediately before the exam, and they'll like 80-85% of the topics are that when you read the question you tend to remember them, but there are only 15% topics, no matter whatever you do, you tend to forget them. So this is another tip, that make a list of the notes. For example, when I was studying, I realized that there are so many dates, deadlines for rules and reliefs that I forget. So I made a list of different dates and I keep revising them. And before the exam, I've just revised that, and then I went to the exam. For me, there were dates. Then there was another topic I was struggling. There was share option schemes. There were 3 share option schemes in our syllabus. There are still now. So they were a bit confusing. So I made a summary for myself, and then I remembered that summary rather than for notes. So try to retranslate the difficult topics into your own language and try to remember from them. This is one tip as well. Any more questions, guys? Okay, so what I will suggest is that that is how I have figured out my revision plan with you, that I will try to cover or touch almost all taxes daily with you, be it IHT, income tax, CGT, corporation tax. There will be days then, for example, today our primary focus was on capital taxes, but there was only a smaller part in which we have discussed the corporation tax. There will be days then we will primarily be focusing on corporation tax and VAT. Lesser focus will be on capital taxes. But I will suggest you to do at least a question just before the exam, not daily. Just before the exam, do a question of all the topics at least once. So that will be my suggestion to you. Uh, if you have any questions, and these are quite precise questions, I will maybe able to answer them on the webinar or through the Facebook page or through email. If there'll be detailed questions, unfortunately I does not have the liberty of that time, so I will not be able to answer long questions. uh, I will not be able to mark anything for you guys, unfortunately, so you have to self mark, and you have to and guys, try to educate yourself by looking at the marking scheme after attempting every question. It will solve many questions into your mind. Students are said like, I have written this much, how much will I score? Sir, I have missed this and this point, how many marks will you gonna deduct? You wouldn't have to ask these questions from me if you're just gonna go yourself and read the marking scheme yourself. Examiner has clearly written for which part or for which point how many marks he has allocated. So you guys can easily self mark your papers as well. Any more questions, guys? Belgian, hopefully you will pass this time. Just have faith. Your marks are suggesting that you were ignoring the easy marks. You said that you have failed twice on 47 and 45. It suggests that you were ignoring easy marks. You were just near to the finishing line. And if you just, try to improve your writing style, your layout, you will be able to score some professional marks. And if you will try to give it an edge using the ethics, which I'll be focusing on, you can easily get over the line. So don't be that much disappointed. All you have to do is you have to simply try to work smart, not hard. I'll be providing the tips for the students that normally fails around 47 or anything above 45. If you're below 45, you have serious issues, you have to work really hard. But if you're around 45, 46, 47, 48, 49, I can help you by giving you few tips. So guys, that's it for today. Uh, I hope that you guys will gonna join tomorrow as well, and you have found this webinar really useful and helpful. I will try to uh, provide you the useful tips, and I'll try to help you as much as I can with my experience, and hope to see you tomorrow. So for today, I'll sign off and I'll see you tomorrow. Till then, take care.